Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Ashrafil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Now, in last week's lesson, we made a start on the chapter regarding the signs of Day of Judgment. And I mentioned that there are three types of signs or alamats which will take place before the end of time. Firstly, there are the major signs which will take place before, say for example, the Day of Judgment, the coming of the Dajjal, the coming of Imam Mahdi, and so on and so forth. Thereafter, there are some other signs which have already happened, such as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's prophethood, other kind of signs such as the splitting of the moon, which happened during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time. And then the third type of signs and alamat, which will happen before the end of time, is basically the minor signs of Day of Judgment. And obviously this is what we're touching on under this particular chapter. Can tell the brother hadith is going on.
Just to close the door, maybe.
We'll close the door.
With that first door.
Okay, now let's have a look at the first hadith. Now, the first hadith which we are going to touch on, one of the minor signs of Day of Judgment, is a hadith which can be found in Sahih Muslim. And this hadith is narrated by Hazrat Abu Hurairah anhu. The Hazrat Abu Hurairah anhu says that La taqumu sa'a, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that La taqumu sa'a, that Qiyamah and the Day of Judgment would not take place hatta yakthura al-mala, until the mal, hatta yakthura al-mal, until there is so much wealth, wa yufidha, and that the wealth will be in abundance. In other words, there would be so much wealth, hatta yakhruja ar-rajul zakata malihi, to the extent that a person will go out with his zakat, فَلَا يَجِدْ أَحَدًا يَقْبَلُهَا مِنْهُ, and he would not find anyone who would be accepting his zakat. Now, this is a minor sign of Day of Judgment, which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that a time will come where there will be so much wealth around. And if you look at, in particular, many Muslim countries, like when you go to Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and so on, around the Gulf region, you'll see that literally money, when you just look around, you know that this is a very rich country. When you see the buildings, when you see the grand hotels and the beaches and the resorts and so on, you could, by looking at it, could tell that it's a rich country. Just go to Arabia and other kind of Middle Eastern countries, where obviously Muslim populated countries, where wealth is not an issue. Wealth is not a problem. So what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, that one of the minor signs of Day of Judgment is that there would be so much wealth. People would have a lot of money. People will be walking on money. People will be wasting their money and so on. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is predicting that a time will come where people would have so much money, all the people would be rich, that a person would go out with his zakat money or whatever he wants to give for zakat. He will walk around and he will try to find a poor person, he will try to find a miskeen or a needy person, but he would not be able to find anyone. And as I was saying, that this is something which is happening, because remember, these are minor signs, and as I explained in last week's lesson, that these minor signs are quite evident when we look around. So we see a lot of people, alhamdulillah, the Muslims are very rich, in certain countries. I gave examples of Dubai, Abu Dhabi and so on, where people, they've got zakat money, but when they try to look for a recipient within their own country, they don't find anyone. They can't find anyone. Hence, they have to then send it to another country or send it to another place. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that a time will come where there will be so much wealth and money around, and there would be no one to accept the zakat. Now, other scholars have said that this particular hadith, which I just mentioned, is referring to the time of Imam Mahdi. That when Imam Mahdi comes, and when he becomes the Amir and the Khalifa of the believers, then it's mentioned that because at that time there will be so much barakah and blessings in the world, that there would be no need for zakat, because everybody would be rich. All the Muslims, all the believers, there will be harmony and peace. There will be no kind of problems and so on. There will be no kind of enmity, no kind of like infighting between Muslims. So a time would come where the Muslims would be so well off and so rich that Imam Mahdi, this is during Imam Mahdi's time, that people would be going out to give zakat, looking for recipients, so on, but they won't find anyone to give zakat to. Another point I want to mention here regarding wealth and so on is that acquiring wealth or having wealth, remember, is a blessing from Allah. It's a ni'mat from Allah. And as with all blessings and ni'mah, you have to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the best way to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessings, there's one way. One is by making dua to Allah and thanking Allah and being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the second way to show your gratefulness and your gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is by spending or by acting upon the blessings which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you. So just say, for example, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had bestowed you with knowledge or ilm, so remember ilm, knowledge, that's a blessing. So the way you show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's thanks, or the way you show gratefulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is by acting upon the knowledge and also then teaching it to others. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows you with wealth, then the way you show your gratefulness to Allah is by spending it in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, spending it for the poor, spending it for the needy. Then that is the way to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's thanks and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's gratitude for the blessings which He has given. So exactly here as well, that with regards to wealth and so on, that whenever we get wealth, this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to then spend it in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which includes obviously giving our zakat, which is obviously first, obviously giving the sadaqah fitr, which is wajib, but also along at the same time other kind of needs whenever it arises, whether it's for the madrasa, or whether it's for markaz, whether it's for masajid and so on, then to give it or to donate it in that particular path, then that is considered to be one of the obligations. Some scholars have said that to spend it in these kind of paths, are in the path of masajids, madarises and so on, it's considered to be an obligation, a communal obligation, because in every area, we need like masajids, productive masajids, we need many khanqahs. So in that situation, it becomes an obligation for the Muslims around to support their local khanqah, to support their local masajids and so on. So this is like a couple of points which I wanted to mention about wealth and so on. So going back to the hadith, he's mentioned that there will be so much wealth and there will be no one there who would want to accept it. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is predicting, and this is what I've just already touched on before, that a time will come, hatta ta'uda ardul arab murujan wa anharan, where the land of Arabia would be muruj, i.e. would be full of gardens, wa anharan, and will be full of rivers. Now whenever we use the word gardens or rivers, it normally gives the meaning of a beautiful place, or an exotic place, or a place which is very beautiful, very expensive and so on. Now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has predicted over 1400 years ago that a time will come when the Arabian land, the Arabian peninsula, will be washed with water. Will be washed with money. Murujan wa anharan means that there will be so much like gardens and rivers, but in other words, in this context, it means that there would be so much wealth and money around these areas. And obviously when we look at the world now, when we look at Arabia, when we look around the Middle Eastern Gulf areas, we see, as I just explained, that the entire state is just full of money. There's like so much oil there, there's full of money, the cars, the clothes, the lifestyle of people there is very, very expensive. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that a time will come when obviously there will be so much money, people would not be able to find anyone to give zakat. And also in this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has predicted that a time will also come when basically the Arabian Peninsula, the Arabian land will be washed with money. There will be so much money there that you could actually, when visiting those areas, you could see that this is a very, very expensive place. So that's one hadith. Now the second hadith which we are going to look at is a hadith which can be found again in Sahih Muslim, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَا تَذْهَبُ الدُّنْيَا, that the dunya would not come to an end حَتَّى يَمُرَّ الرَّجُلُ عَلَى الْقَبْرِ, until a time will come when a man would walk past a grave, على القبر, فَيَتَمَرَّغَ عَلَيْهِ, and he will roll around the qabr, or on the qabr, on the grave, he will roll around. وَيَقُولُ, and he will say to himself, يَا لَيْتَنِي, if only كُنْتُ مَكَانَ صَاحِبِ هَذَا الْقَبْرِ, that I was instead of the dweller of the place. I.e., he would wish to Allah, oh Allah, I wish I was inside the qabr and this person here, he is on earth. Then the hadith goes on to say, وَلَيْسَ بِهِ الدِّينِ إِلَّا الْبَلَى, he would make this wish or desire not because of his deen, not because of his religion, إِلَّا الْبَلَى, but he would make this wish or desire because of the fitna and the musibat and the perishani which is around the world. Now what this hadith Mubarakah is saying is telling us that a time will come when people would have actually enough of the world. People would be like so disheartened from the world. People would be so away from the world that they'll think to themselves, you know what, it's more better that I'm in the grave rather than being alive. Why? Because as the hadith mentioned, because of the fitna and because of the perishani, the musibat and the difficulty, or you could just say the problems which are in the world. Sometimes like when you deal with people and when people betray you, when people cheat on you, when people deceive you, when people give you doka, you then think to yourself, is this dunya? You sometimes question that what are these people doing here? If they do not like differentiate or can't do tamiz between brothers or sisters, and they're tricking and deceiving their own brothers, they're kind of like lying against their own sisters, they're kind of lying against their own uncles, friends, colleagues, they're lying against, they're deceiving their own children, they're deceiving their own parents, they are deceiving. So when you think that this is going around dunya, you think to yourself, what am I doing here? You then start questioning that, I might as well like be in the grave so I could save myself from the fitna of the outside world. Now obviously, alhamdulillah, many of you are more experienced than me. I'm sure you must have gone through situations in life where you probably question people. Like, is that how people are? Is that how people trick people or deceive people and so on? Nowadays, like zulm in particular, very, very common, where people, because of their authority or because they got a bit more power, they use that to kind of do zulm and oppress people. Now I mentioned this before, that zulm is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't forgive unless you get forgiveness from the mazloom and from the oppressed. And another point to remember about zulm is that zulm is something where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destroyed the nations of the past. Kufr and shirk, because of kufr and shirk, a nation or a qawm can survive. But when do the qawm and nation comes to an end? It comes to an end when on top of their kufr and shirk, they start then doing zulm. That's when Allah's azab comes. Take a look at Sayyidina Shuaib alayhi salam, the people of Madian. So he was from Madian, which is like a area near Palestine. So what happened was that his qawm, his people, they were worshipping idols. But they weren't destroyed for worshipping idols. Why were they destroyed for? They were destroyed because, as mentioned in the Quran, وَلَا تَنْكُسُ الْمِكْيَالَ وَالْمِيزَانِ, that they would cheat people in mikyal, i.e. in measurement, wal-mizan, in weight. That they will, a customer would come, he will buy, say, 10 kilograms of, say, dates or barley, but they will deceive him and they'll only give him 9 kilograms. So when they started doing zulm, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's punishment came and seized them and destroyed them. So as I was saying, that there will be so much fitna and musibat and perishani around that people will be longing for death. People would be longing for death. And sometimes we see people, obviously it's not permissible what they've done, but they commit suicide because sometimes they get so distraught with dunya, disheartened from dunya, that they think there's no obviously other options around. So what happens is then they commit suicide. Obviously for those people, we should obviously save them before they do something like that. And this is where obviously our khanqah and our center and tazkiyah comes in. Like obviously we try to encourage them that look, there is always a way out, because that's what Islam is. Islam is a solution for all our problems. That's what it is. We just need to ask the right people. We need to go to the right people and the right places, and we will find the solutions for everything. So for these people who are distraught, who are kind of going through problems, who are kind of going through these perishanis, then you need to explain to them that there is a way to get out and so on. There is a solution, and that is the solution of Islam. Explain to them, bring them, take, classes, dhikr, tazkiyah and so on. This is how they will purify themselves. But what we can gather from this particular hadith is that time will come where there will be so much fitna and problems around that person will be longing for death. Inshallah, we'll leave in this particular hadith. May Allah give us the tawfiq to act on what's been said. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah.